Hey, campfire crew, let's get it on. My creepy Urbex story, submitted by GP124. My name is George, and I'm sharing this scary Urbex story with you. This happened to me and my best friend Dave back in 2005. We'd seen a bunch of stuff on TV, the whole ghost hunters thing and people checking out weird and strange places, so we decided that we could do the same thing in our little town. There were some abandoned buildings and an old quarry that we wanted to check out, just to see anything that had been left after everyone had abandoned the places. The buildings were pretty boring. Most of them had boarded up windows that other people had either pried open and had put plenty of graffiti and beer cans all over the place, that sort of thing. They were more like hangouts for people wanting to party and not cause or arouse suspicions of the place or the police. The quarry was strictly off limits. There were signs all over the place and fences surrounding the entire thing. Yeah, quarries are unbelievably dangerous. Just falling into the existing hole will kill you. I mean, I'm talking a couple of 100-foot drop down, and that doesn't count amongst the people who probably lost their lives swimming or fooling around in the water at the bottom of these holes. But we decided to go out anyway and snoop around one night. Dave was sleeping over at my house, and we were only about a mile away from the quarry if we cut through some woods. We toyed with taking my quad, but realized that that would be dumb and would just arouse suspicions. So, we snuck out of my room that was in the back of our house after my parents had fallen asleep. We were armed with just our backpacks filled with bungee cords, some rope, and our flashlights. We weren't looking for trouble. We just wanted to check things out and see what everything looked like. We knew we couldn't do it during the day, so Dave brought it up as we were sitting around TV watching that night, and that's when we decided to go. When we got there, we found a spot at the fence that we could crawl underneath. All it took was a little digging of sand, and we could slide right under it. I tied a yellow bandana on the fence, so on our trip back we would be able to find the way we got in a little bit easier than having to run around and try to figure out where we had actually gotten in the dark. Once we got into the quarry, it was dead silent. It was a very dark night with just a crescent moon. We didn't turn on our flashlights right away. We wanted to save those for when we entered one of the buildings on the grounds. Again, not wanting to arouse the suspicions of any police or person that might be walking or driving by. I should say that this quarry was about a mile away from the road. There was an access road to it, but I'm sure if anyone was driving along the main road and looked over, they would have seen our flashlights playing around. The first building we went into was an old office building, and there was nothing in there but old filing cabinets and a couple of office chairs. There was stuff still tacked on the walls that looked like old job requisitions or something, and there were also some old maps that Dave thought were awesome, so he took them down and put them into his pack. As far as I know, he still has those. We left that building and went into a bigger building that looked more like where the actual operation of the quarry happened. It was a big building that obviously could house those big dump trucks, that sort of thing. I don't know anything about that business, but it looked like this was the area where trucks would back in and have whatever fill was put into them and then drive off. Either way, it was really spooky and quiet. There was a small office to the side, and I originally assumed that there was a big window separating the room where we were standing in the little office area. That was no longer there, probably long since been destroyed by vandals. The big room that we were in was kind of boring, even though it was spooky. There really wasn't much going on there, so we went into the office, and this is when things got really creepy. There was an old mattress on the floor that looked like it had these dark brown stains and tons of yellow stains. I can't say for sure if any of it was blood, but what we saw on the walls was really disturbing. There were all these pictures of women and young girls in all kinds of crazy tied-up positions. I'm not such a prude that I don't know what bondage is, So I guess I would say that, but none of these women looked like it was consensual. It was really scary. They were all Polaroids, and they were tacked onto the wall below the window level. So if someone had gone into the big room like we had and just walked by, we couldn't have seen them. Neither could have anyone. You could only see them if you were down towards the floor. I looked at Dave and said, "Man, this is really creepy. We should just get the hell out of here." But Dave was intrigued and kept poking around with a piece of wood that he found. He tipped over a large flower vase, for lack of a better term, and outpouring from it were a whole bunch of used condoms that had what looked like blood on them. That's when I finally pulled the plug and said, "Dave, we're leaving right now." He said okay, and we made our way back to the fence where the bandana was. I untied it, and we scooted out of there and talked all the way home about what we had seen and if we should tell somebody what we had found. I said we should. Dave said we should just mind our own business. But I looked at him and said, those girls and women did not look like they were enjoying what was going on. And what about all those rubbers? We walked to a Marathon gas station that was only a couple of miles away and made an anonymous phone call to the police. We then got the hell out of there and got back to my house and snuck back inside through my window. We never heard anything else about the quarry or anything that came out of what the police might or might have not looked into. All I know is that it was really scary, and I'll never forget sneaking in there thinking we were just going to find some cool old records and maps and stuff like that. But what we did see was what looked like a place where something really bad happened. I edited it to say this. I just talked to Dave, and he still has the maps from that place. And he wanted to add that he noticed something I hadn't on our way out. It was a hand-drawn sign on the door of the office that said, in really childish-like print, "This is my place. Keep out." Two Dudes Working Together to Get to Find Me by Lila K. Quick note, I'm from the southern USA, and this will be important later. Also, nothing happened in person, but it was close. So, when I was younger, I'm in high school around sophomore year, I was obsessed with IMVU, which is a digital world where you meet tons of people from around the world. I had just gotten out of the hospital for a suicide attempt and wanted a distraction. My friend had told me about IMVU and to check it out, and I did. For a while, I had fun, but I was young and naive and made fatal mistake number one. I used my real name. I was goofing around until I met King, who constantly flirted with me, and it was amazing. Then we moved to DMs and we talked. He said he was 18 and from Spain, and he sent a picture of himself. I found out later it was a male model, and he asked for a picture of me. I made fatal mistake number two. I sent him a photo of myself at the time. He called me all these nice things, and I was thrilled. And then I met his probably fake brother, Marine, who was also on IMVU, and they said I should give them my phone number. I didn't, saying I didn't have any phone. It's a lie. He said I should give him my Skype instead then, which I told him I also didn't have. Lie. He tried very hard to get my contact information, and I didn't give it to him. 2 days later, I was doing my summer homework for high school and received a call from an unknown number. I made fatal mistake number 3. I picked up, and since then I will never pick up a mysterious call unless I recognize the area code and never say my name. I said, "OP speaking," and I heard a robotic voice, typed to speak, say, "You said you didn't have a phone." I responded with, "Who is this?" He replied with, "It's King. Don't you remember me? How you lied to me? That's a naughty thing to do. I should punish you. Are you at my current address where I was, right now? Or are you at the high school that I went to? Or maybe even at a Starbucks where my friends and I hung out? Should I check all places or just track your phone again?" I hung up and turned my phone off. I'd been using my dad's old laptop for schoolwork, and it was sitting on my bed. At this time, I noticed my camera light on my laptop was on to say that the camera was active. My laptop was off. I quickly put a Band-Aid on it, and I would eventually have to open it up again. As soon as it was on, the light went off. I immediately heard a knock. I was so scared it was him, so I got a kitchen knife from the kitchen, and then saw it was my father. I opened the door and just bawled into his shirt. Words from my father and from me to him are in French. "My baby daughter, what's wrong?" I told him everything that happened, from IMVU to the call. He just smiled and listened. He took my phone and my laptop off the bed and put them in a black garment bag. He tied it. He grabbed my packed bag. Divorced parents, I was supposed to spend a week with him anyway. He put them in the hall and guided me to his car. We went to the police, and after I gave a report of what had happened, they took the laptop and phone. Both were still off, and they said they would look into it. My dad took me to his house. They had just moved, so I had hoped King didn't know about that. He left the house with me in the care of my 2 cats and the next-door neighbors. They were and still are close friends. He got me a new laptop and a new phone so I could be able to finish school and have some distractions. The police called my dad a few weeks after I was still staying with him due to my mom's shitty parenting, and they said that the people were sex traffickers who had been known to prey on girls under the age of 16 and then sell them. They were working on finding them and told me to stay off my IMVU, which I already had planned on doing. They were using my account to track them down or something. And so, to the dudes who tracked me down, let's not meet. Ever. P.S. My cousin, my mom's cousin, is an NYPD detective, and when I told him what happened at the family reunion, he just kind of hugged me and said, "You're a tough kid, and if you need me, I'm a 3-digit call away." He was also investigating the same case with girls who weren't as lucky as me and managed to get the case file. He still refuses to tell me anything until it's closed. Paranormal Activities, submitted by Amanda B. I'm writing to tell you about the paranormal things that happen in my house. I figured this would be a good segment for your show, which my whole family absolutely loves. Uncle Josh sidebar, I appreciate that. Thank you. There are several occurrences, so I'm going to try to tell you about the major ones as quickly as possible to keep this story from going on too long. We live in a small town called West Liberty, Kentucky. We've lived in our house for almost 4 years now, but I have a feeling something else has lived here much longer. We've always heard little things or saw things out of the corner of our eyes, but we just chalked it up to nothing and went on. Then questionable things started to happen that couldn't be as easily brushed away. It started after about 2 years we had moved in. Things would disappear and then reappear days or even weeks later. My husband placed a title to a vehicle he was selling in a basket. And when he sold that vehicle, he went to get the title, and it was gone. He, myself, and our 2 children left no stone unturned while we were looking for this title, and we looked for almost a week. We emptied every basket, cabinet, etc., looking for the title. Then, the day my husband was supposed to meet the buyer of the truck, he grabbed into the basket and said, "I know I put that damn title right here in this basket." We both glanced into the basket. There it was, right on top. We laughed it off and jokingly thanked Joe for putting it back. That day, we named the ghost Joe, who we thought had hid the title. We didn't realize how that joke would soon play out in our reality. For a while, nothing happened, and everything went on, normally. Then, a few months later, I was on my lunch break at about 2 a.m. At the time, I was a work-from-home chat representative. I was relaxing while looking down the hall of our house towards my office. As I sat there staring down the hall, dreading going back to work, A tall, human-shaped shadow walked across the hall into my office. I tried to chalk it up to my sleepiness, but then my Mac screen came on and lit up my entire office. My Mac screen would only wake up if you tapped the keys, so I automatically knew it was much more than me, just being tired. I went back from lunch and never saw anything else that night. The next evening, when my husband came home from work, he told me he had almost turned around and come back from work just before 6 a.m. because he thought he had seen a tall, dark man standing outside of my office window, peeping in at me. He too chalked it up to sleepiness and just went on to work. I then told him what had happened just hours before, and we both got chills. It was terrifying. But the events do not end there. I've always been a little afraid of the dark. It always leaves me a little unsettled, even as I sleep. One night, my husband asked if we could just please turn off the TV and try to sleep in the dark, and I hesitantly agreed. We lay there in the dark for almost 20 minutes. I was in complete fear, and I couldn't hold it back anymore, and I started to cry. I asked my husband to please turn the TV back on, and we went back and forth arguing for a few minutes. Then I got a little excited, and with tears in my eyes, begged him to please just turn the TV on. At that moment, the television turned on itself. I'm sure the look on either of our faces was of utter shock. It actually did make me feel better to have the TV on, though, as weird as that seems. We now always sleep with the TV on. Another night, my son had gotten into the shower and, like many kids, hadn't gotten his towel. He yelled and asked me to grab him one, so I had also forgotten, however, a few minutes later. So he yelled out, "Thanks, Mom," from the bedroom. I then said, "Sorry, smartly pants, I forgot." He just laughed, "Haha, very funny," because he had a towel laying on the sink, even though his dad, sister, and I hadn't left the living room the entire time he was in the shower. We were actually watching scary stories on YouTube. Things got quiet for the longest time after that. But now, things are starting to happen again. About 2 months ago, I had grounded my daughter from her phone, and as I was walking to the bathroom later that night, I heard some dishes rattling around as if someone were washing the dishes. As I was rounding the corner to the kitchen, I said aloud, "Nice try, Grace. You're not getting your phone back." But to my dismay, as I did round that corner into the kitchen, the rattling and the rustling of the dishes stopped, and there was no one in the kitchen at all. Nothing had been moved. Everything had been left just where I had left it. The next occurrence was the only one where we actually have audio proof. My daughter had been making TikTok video. Days later, her dad was watching her videos because we always monitor them because she's only 13. He yelled for me to come into the room. He said, "I need you to listen to this." She was making a video in the bathroom and acting silly. It was late for her to be up making noise, and everyone else was sleeping but me at this time when she was making this video. In the video, she got loud, and she stopped talking for a second, and you could clearly hear a man in an irritated voice say, "Quiet." After I watched this TikTok video, we let our daughter listen as well. She was completely freaked out, to say the least. A couple of days ago, it sounded like someone fell in our shower and proceeded to knock everything down in the shower in the process. My son Whitley and I were the only two ones at home. I jumped up to check on him, thinking he had fallen. He's only 11. Nothing was out of place in the shower, and my son was on the couch sleeping. Nothing dangerous has happened, but it seems as if things are slowly escalating, which is kind of scary. I'm not really sure what will happen next or what we will need to do if things continue on this path. We have named our ghost Joe, as I said. I'm starting to feel maybe things aren't going to be as harmless as they had previously seemed. I'll keep writing you if anything else major happens. I just wanted to let people know that this stuff does happen to normal people, people that would give anything to just be completely normal again. Ignorance truly is bliss. I forgot to close the garage door. Submitted by Private Joker. This is embarrassing, and holy shit, I can't believe I'm even sending it to you. My story has a good outcome, but all of this happened because I'm a fucking dumbass. I was working in my garage on my car one night, and this was probably back in 2013. I was so wrapped up in what I was doing, when I was finished, I didn't think to shut my garage door. I had left some tools on an end table, and I was just kind of standing watching a Red Sox game on a TV I had out there. It was about 10:30. I decided to stop working, and I turned the TV off, drained my beer, and then figured I would just take care of the rest of the things I needed to the next day. And this was a Saturday night, and I knew that I would be able to get back to work on Sunday. My biggest blunder? I didn't hit the button to shut our garage door. By the time I went inside, my wife was getting ready to watch Saturday Night Live and maybe just snuggle up on the couch with me. Our kids were already in bed, and I just wanted to clean up and hang out with my wife, so I washed my hands and I sat down next to her. I fell asleep during Saturday Night Live, and when I woke up, I told my wife that we should go to bed and that I would carry her up there if she wanted me to carry her. This was always a joke between us. She fell asleep, I went upstairs, brushed my teeth, and got into the sack. I knew my wife would wake up in an hour or two and just follow my lead, but right there, man, I just wanted to catch on some sleep. What happened next is the most terrifying thing I have ever experienced. I heard someone coming upstairs. I should mention that we have a 2-story home. My kids' rooms are right off of our room with the bathroom in between. In my foggy sleepiness, I figured it was just my wife coming upstairs getting ready to come to bed, so I kind of did the half-squinty eye thing to look out into our hallway. What I didn't expect is what I got. There was a shape in our bedroom doorway, and it certainly was not my wife. It was a man. He was standing there with his arms down to his sides, and this isn't one of those stupid no-sleep stories where the guy has a machete or a giant knife. This was just a guy standing there looking at me as I slept. I didn't overreact, and I didn't jump up and go into Jean-Claude Van Damme moves. I didn't kick his ass or anything like that. I just sat up and said, "Who are you?" The guy just stood there staring at me for a moment and then said, "You have a really nice house." Before I could do anything, and believe you me, I did get up fast, this guy just turned and walked out of my doorway, down the stairs, and went back out through the garage door. I chased after him and stood at my front door watching him walk across my lawn before I grabbed our Cricket phone and called 911. My wife was still asleep on our couch and had zero idea that this guy had ever even been in our house. While I was on the phone with the police, I ran back upstairs to make sure that my kids were okay, and they were fine. Everyone in my house was asleep. They never knew this guy came in. The police showed up about 5 minutes later and went up and down my street looking for this guy, but they didn't find him or anything else. For whatever reason, he just stumbled into my house, came through my garage door, walked right up to me while we were all resting. I mean, he didn't steal anything, he didn't threaten us, he just kind of showed up. I made the police report, and they said they would continue to drive up and down the street for the rest of the night to see if the guy came back. And then they chastised me for not closing my garage door. Hell, I didn't need that at that point. I felt bad enough. But for a guy who always locks the front and back doors, I felt like such a dumbass for leaving my garage door open and allowing this dude to just walk into my home. Yeah, he didn't hurt us. He didn't steal anything. But holy shit, he could have. They hit the wrong car. Submitted by Racer X. The year was 1996 or 97. It was about 2 p.m.-ish when my wife, now my ex-wife, and I were driving home on some 2-lane back roads after dropping our kids off with the grandparents so we could enjoy some time alone. Then we came to a straightaway. Now, of course, there were quite a few cars in front of us and heading in the other direction, so I couldn't go any faster than the posted speed limit, nor pass anybody. So my ex and I were just chatting, listening to tunes, and we joked about the kidless silence when I noticed a small red four-door sedan with someone hanging out the back passenger window on the left side of the car in the coming lane. As my ex was looking out her window talking, I said out loud, "The hell is this fool doing?" My ex turned to see what I was talking about, and I realized what the answer was. This fool launched something from his hand at my windshield. Assuming it was a rock or a brick, I ducked to my right, shielding my ex, when the items hit my windshield and exploded. I then swerved my car right, following by me slamming on the brakes, coming to a complete stop on the half shoulder in grass. I sat back up to look at my ex and asked if she was okay, to which she nodded yes and asked what the hell had hit us. So then I looked at the windshield. It was an egg. I looked up in my rearview mirror and saw the red car trying to speed off, but due to the traffic that I had mentioned, they were having trouble flooring it, and then proceeded to pass by, crossing the center lane, hitting oncoming cars. Now I was seeing red. So I told my ex to hang on, then whipped my 1993 Toyota Corolla around and started to pursue this asshole. Granted, my little four-door was not the sport model. I made it a sport model. I passed two cars on the shoulder and gained some ground, but then came to a halt when I came upon other vehicles that I could not get around without putting lives in danger. I told my ex to keep watching to where this red car was going so I could focus on the road, while trying to see if and when I could pass vehicles ahead of me. By now, everyone listening to this story is thinking, why doesn't your ex just use her cell phone and call the police? Well, granted, at this time cell phones were getting smaller and more affordable. We only had one, and my ex told me during this pursuit that it was on our kitchen counter still charging. So, no cell phone. The road we were on was starting to go up an incline, and my ex pointed at the windshield yelling, "Hey, there they go!" They were heading into a subdivision on the left, and as I looked over, I could see this red car flying up the subdivision inclining street. But by now I had to slow way down due to the other cars slowing down, stopping and turning into side streets on the left and the right of the straightaway. I'm thinking, this subdivision has to have other exits, and I said so to my ex. Fuck, I thought. I think we lost them. My ex says, "Hey, it's okay. You tried, and I'm really sorry about leaving the cell at home." But then, as I finally made the left into the subdivision, I saw an SUV parked in the street, and a dozen of eggs, minus one, ditched under it. So I informed my ex that I was going to cruise the subdivision, just in case these people lived here or if they were doubling back. My ex said okay, and I slowly cruised through the subdivision. After about 5 minutes into the search, I was still coming up to the main subdivision street, when it started to bend to the right with a side street to the left, and one on the right further up, when I saw movement to my left. I snapped my head to the left, and lo and behold, on the left side street, here comes the little red car creeping. I shouted, "There you are, you little shit," and then floored it up the rest of the main street, making a hard left, almost doing a three-wheel motion. By now, the driver of the red car had stopped in the middle of the street, later finding out it was a cul-de-sac. And I skidded the car sideways, blocking them from going any further, and then I told my ex to wait in the car. As I got out and started walking to this little red car, I saw there were 4 young teenagers looking between 15 or 16, all inside, and wide-eyed. Yeah, people, I could have shot at them, but at that time my adrenaline was so high I felt bulletproof, and these weasels were going to pay. Besides, by now there were people looking out the windows of all the homes, so if I did take a bullet, there would be plenty of witnesses. I yelled at the driver to get out of the car, or I'd be yanking him out. The driver briefly looked at his buddy in the front passenger seat, then opened his door and stepped out. Now I was thinking, what should my next move be? Using his face to clean off my windshield? Activating his dental plan? But to my right, I saw a lady stepping out on her front porch, and she had a cordless phone in her hand. Yeah, people still had those. So I told this kid in a loud voice, "Come with me, we're going to borrow this lady's phone and call the police." With me behind the kid, we both walked over to the lady with the phone, and I asked her if she would call the police because this little shit and his pals were throwing eggs at cars. The lady looks at the kid with disgust, then back to me, handing me the phone, saying, "You can do it." So I dialed 911, informed the dispatcher what had happened, and that I'd caught this little idiot, and to please send the police to this lady's address, and do it quickly before my anger precedes me. By the time I handed this lady's cordless phone back to her and started escorting this kid back to our cars, I could hear sirens in the distance, and then saw 2 squad cars flying up the main subdivision street, turning left, and then skidding to a stop by our 2 cars. One officer walked over to me, and the other walked over to the red car and ordered the teens to get out, show them his IDs, and then to keep their hands where he could see them. I then explained to the one officer of what had gone down leading up to this capture, and he wrote down info and then started walking over to the other officer, who now had all 4 kids out, up against their red car, and had them talking. During this time, my ex was asking me what the hell was up, and I told her I wasn't sure, when a minivan pulled up behind my car, since my car as well as the police had the street blocked. A lady got out and asked me what was going on, and I just told her that I caught these kids throwing eggs at cars, and she said, "Good," and then took her 4-year-old daughter out, and they walked the rest of the way home. After that quick chat with the soccer mom, another squad car pulled up, and that officer got out and walked to the other 2 officers who had 3 passengers in the back of his car, and they still had the driver with his hands on the hood. Then 2 officers approached me, and while the other stood with the juveniles, he asked if I wanted to press charges, and I quickly said yes. I mean, hell yeah, if I let this go, they're just going to do it again to somebody else. The officer who arrived last said that he handled juvenile crimes and criminal cases. He explained to me the whole story of what would happen, which is way too long to explain here. But in the end, since it was their first offense, there would just be a small court cost and maybe some small fines. I then said to the officer, "So you're just going to let them go home with a 'how about you guys don't do that again' warning and then call it a day?" The officer said, "No, sir, they're in a heap of trouble. First, all their parents have been called and have been informed of what's gone down. Second, their school has also been contacted since they'd skipped school to go and do as what one of the kids said was to egg stuff, which, by the way, was your car, their first and last target. 3 of these teens are going to be taken home in the back of 2 squad cars, while the driver will be followed home by me. And to top it off, all 4 teens, as well as their parents, will be having meetings with 2 of our detectives. They happen to be investigating some crimes of vandalism that have happened in this area. If they did that as well, there will be a higher level of punishments." In the end, I told the officer I would not press charges. And with that, they escorted the 4 teens over to me and my ex, who was still sitting in my car. They all apologized, which in turn I informed them my ex has MS, and if she had been driving, she may not have had as quick reflexes as me, and it might have caused her to crash, seriously injuring herself or maybe even being killed, which would have fucked up many lives, not to mention some other driver who might have just put 4 bullets into them. I called it a day and told them that staying in school would have been a better option. That's when the officer spoke up and said, "Why don't you make them pay for a super deluxe car wash?" I said, "That's a great idea." And with that, the 4 teens pulled out their wallets. I literally yanked out all of the cash they had, thanked the officers, jumped into my little Toyota Corolla, and we proceeded to the nearest car wash, purchasing the super deluxe wash with some cash left to spare and a story to tell.
Crazy Neighbor by Determined Little Boy. This is less of a creepy one-person encounter and more a whole community creeped out by one man. The neighbor in question is somewhat famous for his lawn, an impossibly thick green landscape that he had tended by a company. I've vaguely been aware of him losing it on the landscapers, screaming at them outside, and enough I knew he had a temper. The first real red flag that he might be legit crazy came last summer. He asked a teenage boy in the neighborhood to check in on the house once a day and make sure all the doors and windows were secured and water their flowers. The day they left, though, he left a crazy list saying the kid had to be there multiple times a day, turning off and on different sets of lights at specific times, and leaving weird chores for him. Also, the kid was not allowed to walk on the lawn and had to remove his dirty shoes before walking on the concrete sidewalk. He was never to enter the house, but was to turn off and on the lights from the doorway by means of a stick with a loop on it. Also, he was not allowed to use the garden hose to water the lawn and had to use instead a teeny tiny watering can. The letter implied that my neighbor would have the kid under surveillance and would have pictures if he failed to comply. Basically, the kid's parents called him and said they weren't comfortable with the situation anymore, and while they would keep an eye on the house, the deal was off. They argued over the phone. When my neighbor got back from vacation, it was early morning, and he immediately went to their house, woke them up, and tried to pick a fight with them. One of the other neighbors is a retired cop, and he came out to see what was going on and tried to settle the issue. Crazy neighbor said that he would let it rest if he was allowed to bare-ass spank the kid. He flipped out when they told him hell no. Sometime after this, another neighbor was at the grocery store when he was cornered by the crazy neighbor. The crazy neighbor apparently just talked at him in rapid fire for half an hour. Among the other things he said, he started saying how wives shouldn't have friends, and said that his wife's sister was so fat she broke the toilet seat last time she visited. After this, everyone started talking about how you don't see his wife anywhere. Occasionally she will be out watering flowers, but while her husband is seen out, she isn't. Considering that she used to be a social butterfly, this is weird. During the winter, everyone found pamphlets in their mailbox from the landscaper he uses, along with a note saying it was mandatory to now use this landscaper in our area, and failure to comply will result in being sued. We are private, single-family homes with no homeowners association, so this is patently untrue. Also during the winter, someone saw his wife and her arm was in a sling and she had a black eye. When they went to ask her about it, he wouldn't let her speak to her and said that she had slid on the ice. Since then, there have been a few attempts made to talk to her alone, and all have failed. Some people have gone so far as to get their church involved and to call a welfare check by the cops when he was out of the house. But if she was being abused, she was refusing to help. Snow was bad this year, and the crazy neighbor blew a fit about the snowplows piling snow on his property, so he scattered screws on the roadway outside before they came in the morning. Then someone in the neighborhood got a puppy. It's quiet and has a fenced-in backyard. Its owners woke up in the middle of the night to the doorbell ringing, and when they came out, crazy neighbor was standing on the road at the edge of the property. He told them that the first time the dog gets out, they won't have a dog anymore, and pulls out a gun and waves it around before pointing it towards the backyard and says, "Bang." Obviously, they go back inside and call the cops. When confronted, crazy neighbor claims he was out for a walk, thought they were awake and stopped by. He says he didn't get the gun out, but it had been on his belt, and that he didn't mean his statement as a threat. He got some sort of citation from the police. Come springtime, he is taken to sitting outside and writing something every time someone walks or drives by. We don't know what, but I have taken to driving differently home to avoid going by him. Most recently, someone put up a swing set in their backyard, and they came back from work to find tire tracks through the backyard, and the swing set run over and crushed. No one saw anything, but his massive truck happens to have the same kind of tires as the tread marks left behind. The retired cop is taken to compiling statements from everyone and keeping records, because we think this is going to end badly. Hey gang, thanks for listening to this episode of Uncle Josh's True Scary Stories, and thanks to all the people who have submitted stories and continue to do so. It's well appreciated. We're living in a very strange time right now, and as I said in my last live broadcast, and I'm going to be doing another live broadcast this week if you're interested, take care of each other. We're all we've got. Social distance, but if you know somebody needs some help,
please reach out to them and take care of them. Follow me on social media. I will do my best to actually start doing that better, and I know I say that every time I say this. The links to that are in the description below. And until next time, everyone, be excellent to each other. And remember, be wary of things that go bump in the night. It could be anything. A ghost, a monster, or the guy next door.